back to Africa This Morning. We're now on Table Talk, and today we're going to be discussing institutions that are intent on getting businesses to work more efficiently. And one such institution that is running ahead of the pack is ADEC Innovations, and we're joined by the President and CEO, James M. Donovan. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Beryl, good morning. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. When you're looking at getting business to the level of optimum efficiency, what does that take before we get into the history of ADEC Innovations?
It generally takes, first of all, leadership and understanding what is the data within a particular business. Our particular product or commodity that we help with is data, and to help bring visibility, therefore helping corporations or governments make better decisions.
When you're looking at data right now, that's the optimum currency. When it's getting businesses to that point, they're able to manage their resources, both human and also financial. Let's get to the history of ADEC Innovations. At what point did you realize that there's need in this area, and what led to the creation of ADEC Innovations specifically?
ADEC is 20 years young. We started actually in the Philippines 20 years ago, and from 2 people we've grown to be just over 5,500 people globally. It's been a phenomenal run. ADEC focused on finding data, giving visibility, helping people make smarter decisions. That led us to what is now called a big data sort of revolution. But frankly, it's been with us a very long time. The tools have evolved substantially in the recent years. If you could imagine the amount of data that's being produced every day in the world from devices and so many different aspects, but how do you sort through that? How do you, get through a huge...
And make sense of it.
Absolutely. You're going through a huge bale of hay trying to find actionable decisions. So we provide solutions for companies and governments in that area.
Before we get to the nitty-gritty of getting the governments and institutions to understand the solutions that are present in data, 2 to 6,000, 20 years young, how did that vision evolve to this point where we are celebrating the strength of the institution?
Myself and my partner, Carol Esquerra, we really had a passion for process with a purpose. We saw the opportunity to take at that time was the natural resources in the Philippines and be able to develop processes that would enable people or empower them to do their businesses better. In those early days, we were really focusing on that, and that further evolved us into now what we're doing is sustainability, health information, and education. Technology and data management are our main bailiwicks. It was a fantastic journey.
20 years on, 6,000 staff, or 6,000 people strong. What are the strengths that represent, especially on the African continent, in relation to ADEC Innovations? What, for example, on the Kenyan platform, do you tap into as an advantage?
It's people, and people. We were very fortunate to start in Kenya 3 years ago, and what we saw is the opportunity to first Kenya's youth and vibrant market. Their capabilities is to start an operation here. We have about 60 staff, and we see that as not only to grow within the Kenyan market, but to use it as a platform for the rest of Africa. And the additional plus was that the UN is actually, UN Environmental Assembly is located here. When
you're looking at getting to maximize on the advantages on the African continent, you've mentioned the youth. How are we linking up with the population that is very hungry to take on the technology, to take on data, to understand their place when it comes to the data revolution?
Well, we have some dynamics going on that globally that Africa's growth is really going to shoot off the charts versus the rest of the world, which is in a low growth or no growth mode. So the world is really looking at what Africa can develop with its emerging population. Technology that Africans can basically get today is leapfrogs ahead of developed countries that have already invested in certain infrastructure that they're kind of married to at this point. So actually technology has a great enabling factor. The youth are all connected. Frankly, the reality is you carry a bank in your pocket with a smartphone. Capabilities are even emerging of more tools and technologies to connect the youth.
top areas that you're going to be focusing on, even as you're dawning into the past 20-year period, that you're going to be focusing on to push the agenda of better consciousness in data management?
For us, data is really just an enabler to help people make smarter decisions. Our focus is connected towards where the Sustainable Development Goals, and to drive sustainability, health information, education. We believe by ADEC helping to focus and enabling institutions or governments to bring better services to the people, faster, better, more efficient, is what our role is. So ADEC Innovation is an enabling company.
When you're looking at enabling companies, there are several within the African continent, not to mention the thousands on the global continent. What gives you an advantageous position, even as you're looking at data management?
We view that ADEC has always been a pioneer, and the opportunity for us to take those roots and come to Africa and say, frankly, is there anything really different than some of the other providers? I would say, on one hand, no. On the other hand, it's about our vision. Our vision is to participate in this societal change that is coming about, where society is dealing with the environment or sustainability in a much different way. And frankly, we hope that there should be 100,000 or 1 million ADECs are needed to basically bring this revolution of change.
Even as you're talking about thousands of others that are needed, when you're looking at the private sector, they cannot work on the agenda of the data revolution or taking advantage of the data revolution on their own. Private-public partnerships are very key when it comes to getting the agenda of data management at the forefront for the African continent, and especially the governments. What conversations are you having, for example, here in Kenya, to push us to be more conscious about data management?
Actually, on several fronts. It really is a combination. It creates the nexus of policymakers and civil society need to come together, and they are much. I've been in this for many years. Public-private partnerships are much more aligned today in bringing government services and civil society to deliver the needed goods faster to the market. Kenya has a unique position with a very vibrant staff that can basically help deliver services, not just to Kenya, but to the rest of Africa.
Even as you're looking at delivering services, you have benchmarks that are set.
Yes.
The year 2020 is very significant for ADEC. Maybe you can share with us how you've set that benchmark and how that is synchronizing with some of the benchmarks we've set on the African continent, on the global front, specifically looking at the year 2030.
2030 is a big agenda for the UN and for the globe. Last year the UN launched the Sustainable Development Goals, 17 goals that the globe and the UN needs to rally around. And this is the nexus of science, policymakers, and civil society coming together to say, we need to address some of these challenges. I won't go through every one, but it covers from poverty to climate change. So many challenges that we actually are now involved in the partnership with the UN to help deliver solutions. The globe is effectively, we're beyond our natural boundaries of resources, and we need to bring that in. What we feel is 2030 agenda, our role in that is to deploy solutions. Our business is really about organized disruption. If you think about business as usual for the last 100 years, it cannot continue. And we believe that a revolution in organized disruption needs to take place. And there's roles in it for every single person, from civil society to science to the policymakers.
How can we better organize ourselves so that we can get to that point of organized, focused disruption?
Yes.
To get ourselves to that point, we're able to tap into the advantages provided for us through the Sustainable Development Goals so that we do not experience the failures that were present during the Millennium Development Goals era.
First, I think you're in one of the greatest businesses of communication. I don't think we properly communicated to the world what was the Millennium Goals, why did it matter. We're really taking a different step this time with the sustainability goals, because if we don't engage with civil society and involve them in the journey, generally speaking, government represents about 20% of any economy, and the private sector is 80%. we need to actually have them involved from day one, all parts of civil society and private sector, to get them on board and help them understand that without a healthy environment, there is no business. Without water, there is no staff.
Are there conscious platforms that you're taking advantage of to push the campaign on the civil society front to get us to be more conscious on the use of data for development?
Data for development, big data is starting to be embraced. Some of the challenges are, there are government offices, let's say in the statistics area, that have certain disciplines that do not necessarily today embrace all the capabilities of big data. So there needs to be further communication of government and private sector or new technologies to be able to take advantage of non or unstructured data. The amount of information that is possible to help people make smarter decisions about where to deliver, let's say, health into certain areas. You need to be able to get rapid feedback of information from the field versus the standard statistics taking and surveys. So the joining together to understand that these new tools are enablers and they need to be embraced.
What challenges are you navigating on the African continent? Data has been one of the challenges that we have had a huge gap in on the African continent when it gets to governments being able to create policies that are responsive to the needs of the population. How are you navigating that black spot?
I would say, first of all, it's always been a bit of an anomaly of how Africans, the continent's numbers are represented on a global stage. So I believe that is actually getting more visibility and starting to understand that there is absolutely vibrant economies that are succeeding and moving forward. The numbers don't always, that are put out by governments, don't always represent that because they don't properly capture the gray economy. We believe that data and new technologies can do that, so that the reason about capturing data is so that we can help policymakers truly understand where they need to put their efforts to educate or to bring new services.
Are there new formulas that you're engaging? Because when it comes to navigating the black spot of minimal or lack of data in general in different areas in policy making, and even for companies that need to create strategies for better or efficient management of their business, how are you going to be able to create formulas without any kind of forerunning strategy in the arena?
This is where organized disruption, we believe, is coming in. I don't have an answer for that, but we know that the iterative process is not going to get us there. We're far outrunning our current resources. We need to
change how we are doing business.
Correct, and I don't have the answer of how, but we are enabling lots of coalitions, many NGOs to engage in their businesses, and some of them will fail, some of them will not prosper. But in the private sector, we're very much used to sort of fail fast is one of the rules.
Fail forward.
Fail forward and adjust your business plan and go forward. The scale of global change that's needed is very concerning. I mean, what keeps me awake at night is really, are we doing enough? Are we properly communicating? Is this step-by-step basis going to be enough? And I don't think it is. What gets me up in the morning is really the excitement of the possibilities of how we can introduce change that will absolutely drive a disruption that none of us saw, and we will go forward from there.
And create impact.
Yes.
Even as you say, that is what keeps you up at night. It has given you the recognition of being accorded the Business Advisory Board of the Public-Private Partnership Center of Excellence under the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. That's a mouthful, but a huge responsibility all the same. How do you pull from that and the best practices platforms that are available on the European front to advise institutions that are willing to take up data revolution on the African continent?
That particular role is about bringing best practices of public-private partnerships. So we advise, or the UN ECE sends business or private sector specialists to help governments and lawmakers understand what some of the successes and failures has been in the last 30 years of PPPs. It's not just data. PPPs are now being rolled into non-traditional areas of health and education and IT services. So we have to take some of the successes and some of the ones that didn't work so well, understand and learn from them. The understanding that every PPP country is at a different, or every country is at a different level of maturity of how to engage the PPP model. It's a bit of a kitchen sink term, but actually it can be a fantastic tool to enable the trillions of dollars that needs to move into the SDGs. We need to basically bring public and private together in whatever business model. PPP is one business model or one delivery model, but there are business concessions, there are other arrangements that government and private sector can do to leap forward to deliver these services.
Even as you're looking at the PPP, isn't that the strongest model for the African continent at this point?
It is a model. We absolutely believe in its capability, but it is not the silver bullet. You need to look at concessions. Sometimes governments are in a much better position to deliver certain services. Sometimes private sector are much better to truly deliver it and turn the keys over. Public-private partnership is something that tends to be for medium and long-term. Some infrastructure projects, there tends to be a lot more funding needed initially to do the studies, to assure that you have a long-term good legal structure. It is absolutely an enabling tool, but again, one of many tools in the kit.
Even as you're talking about doing business on the African continent and data being very key, technology plays a big part when it comes to engaging efficient models of management or models of doing business. One of the aspects that has arisen, and this is one aspect that you're very conscious about, considering that you're very in the know when it comes to United Nations runnings, how can we better adopt a more conscious approach when it comes to the environment when you're doing business on the African continent to get on board on saving our environment for the future generations?
We believe that the days of CSR being a sort of an external exercise, just an add-on, are quickly coming to an end. People are having to build in CSR or sustainability into their business model because the social contract, people's capability to look into a business and say, are you doing the right thing? We're in an unbelievable age of transparency, and people's capability, civil society's capability to look at a corporation or an enterprise and say, you're not doing the right thing. And that really gets the attention of the executives to say, if there is a social contract that a company has and it's not being fulfilled, they will lose their market share. They will not be in existence. And frankly, as election cycles really get the attention of politicians, the customers get the attention of CEOs. We believe in providing data to help companies and governments help make better decisions and get ahead of that. In summary, we believe that a blended business model where sustainability and P&L can coexist and must in this new revolution. And this is not just for Africa. Frankly, this is for every country, everywhere, every person needs to be engaged in the Sustainable Development Goals.
What are the challenges that you're experiencing right now, even as the conversation of data still keeps gaining traction?
Business as usual. Business as usual is our challenge, that companies are still saying we're waiting for regulation. We absolutely understand that, but there are areas that are drought-ridden, and there are areas where we have conflict and then spilling over of millions and millions of refugees. The problems are endless, but there cannot be, private enterprise cannot thrive in those type of environments. And the ones that are in those spaces absolutely understand that. To be able to embrace and disrupt business as usual is the challenge.
Give us a guide for businesses that are intent on taking up organized, focused, deliberate disruption for their businesses to move forward.
So some people would call it innovation. Some people I'm taking a little bit more of an aggressive. They need to innovate and they need to bring sustainability and see the advantages. Sustainability really is about managing resources and not having waste, which means having a better business model, look at new ways of doing things to deliver services to your particular clients. And the ones that don't, frankly, will not have a market share and eventually won't have a business.
Give us your thoughts, even as we're talking about innovation. We've talked about businesses taking up a more conscious approach when it comes to protecting the environment.
Yes.
Even as this week, we, as Nairobi, hosted the United Nations the second assembly in relation to environmental protection, UNEA. Share with us your thoughts on what businesses need to be very conscious of, even as we're collaborating on a national, but also looking at our role on the continental and also international front.
UNEA, actually, Nairobi has hosted the UN UNEP since its founding and has had a key role in developing environmental policies and helping people go along a journey. That has to speed up in a factor of thousands %. We believe that the Sustainable Development Goals, UNEA driving that, is helping to bring a parliament of the environment together, to bring the highest level of policymakers from 196 countries together and getting them involved. So this is UNEA 2. It's very exciting that, frankly, environment never had a seat at the table 40, 20 years ago. To see that today within corporate or government, that environment is actually not only at the table, but helping to drive the discussion about where we're going. Sustainability development is no longer just a nice to have, it is a must have.
When you're looking at the future, 20 years in, the focus is...
20 years young.
20 years young, you're looking at the focus and you've indicated that, yes, the major challenge is businesses continuing on with the same challenge of doing business as usual. 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, what can we expect from ADEC? What can we expect that the continent must have achieved in relation to relationship with you?
First of all, we're very excited to be here. This is our third year in Kenya, and we are actually expanding. I would say for ADEC, our goal is to deploy capital in the next 5 years into continued solutions and services for governments and corporations. It's no longer just, it's not necessarily the amount of employees, it's about technology and the amount of change that we can have and help people develop their business models in a better way.
Solution-based agenda when it comes to businesses.
Yes. We truly understand that if you talk about so much about tomorrow or next year, it's very difficult for a P&L driven CEO or a board of directors to adopt and spend money on so much that's 10 years down the road. So we really need to bring tangible solutions that can help them in their business today, but then bring them to a point that making smarter decisions and moving their business forward is revolutionary. And the ones that don't, frankly, will be not in business.
You're talking about businesses that are already established. Give a word for those who are in the starting phase. What tips would you give them even as they're launching into a market that has its traditions set, but they have the advantage of having new thinking, they're more malleable? What approach do you think you would give them even as they're getting into the market?
Start today. Get involved. The contract that society has had with the environment is absolutely being torn up. The new rules for the next 25 to 50 years or driving towards this Agenda 2030 are absolutely changing. And the amount of disruption and the ability for new players to come in, that's what we want. I mean, frankly, we would be more than happy to see 10,000 ADECs, because they are going to deliver change and disruption, and that's the scale that the world needs. What we don't believe that just by continuing on and having a 10% change, we need to have things change, and only new thinking, new companies, startups can bring that into the environment. Give
the value to data at this point, because we've talked about the strategy to go in, start early, yes, but what value do they need to give to data?
Again, data is our currency. It is the currency of the, not just for us, but it's the currency of the future. It's being able to make rapid decisions across huge amounts of data so that you can adjust your product or service very, very rapidly. The amount of data that's being created every day is basically 90% has been created just in the last year from all of these different devices. And that's only going to continue to go up.
Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Thank you for having me.
The story behind ADEC Innovations. When it comes to innovations, data is currency, as we've kept emphasizing during this conversation. But that is a conversation that cannot end in one sitting. It's one that the African continent needs to take up and take up aggressively, with governments being more keen on adopting data-based policy changes to be able to be responsive to the needs of the continent at this point, not to mention the needs of Kenyans, even as we're adopting a more conscious approach in policy making. Thank you so much for joining us from the team and myself. Enjoy the rest of your viewing on Ebru TV.